Good afternoon. My name is John Tierpak, Executive Director of the Unemployment Law Project, and welcome to our Monday webinar. We will have an update of on unemployment, current unemployment developments from Ann Paxton, and we will take your questions in the Q&A afterwards. The Unemployment Law Project provides free representation advice to counsel for people with Washington State unemployment claims. You can contact us by phone or through our website if you're seeking advice or representation for a hearing. So Ann, could you take it away with your update? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for tuning in. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and there is not a lot of news today, but I do want to give you some highlights just to get the week started. So this, just briefly, what we're seeing right now is benefit claims are falling significantly. They were rising for a while. And the unemployment rate is also falling, although there's a lot of difference of opinion about what rate is actually most accurate. So this is at both national and in Washington State. But the number of jobs that's being added nationally has not been considered to be as encouraging. The news is not as encouraging. Less than 200,000 jobs added in September. That's way below forecasts and way below hopes. So there's a little difference of opinion about how healthy the job market is, how many jobs are out there for people to take who are unemployed, and exactly what is the true unemployment rate. There's quite a lot of variation. The official one is 4.8%. And the unemployment rate basically is the number of people who are looking for work, that is, they're in the job market, compared to the total labor force, which is everyone over the age of 16. But the true rate of unemployment, there's a lot of belief is much higher, maybe as much as 4 times higher, according to some policy analysts. That is because a lot of people have given up looking for work. A lot of them are stuck in low wage, low hour jobs that they did not choose. They're maybe outside their film when they really wanted to have outside their field when they really wanted to have full-time jobs. So there's still a lot of difference of opinion about that. What is the best measure? What can we say when we look out and see who's working, who's not, and what's happening with the pandemic? I think you can use your own judgment on a lot of that, and it might be just as good as having this wide array of numbers available. So meanwhile, the White House is saying there was some talk about extending the federal benefits, which ended last month. That is not going to happen. What they've said is that they consider us to be in a period where we don't need enhanced benefits anymore. The Secretary of Labor has said we're heading in the right direction. That was the unemployment benefit was there in the beginning. Tens of millions of Americans were out of work overnight, but and there was still high unemployment when President Biden came in. But he says that looking at the September jobs report, it supports their stance that all of a sudden still unemployment rates are dropping and wage growth is continuing, and several states have agreed that there is no need to take on their own version of the federal benefits, including Washington, which has come out and said it's too costly to maintain the weekly benefits, and congressional action would be needed to extend those benefits, which is not likely to happen right now. So that's really not something that's in the cards. I want to mention that the federal programs, however, even though they expired last month technically, they will be retroactively available to claimants who qualified if their application was put in on time. And the last deadline was December. I don't have to check what the most latest deadline is, but for each program had a final day that you could apply. And if you got your regular UI benefit application in, that is the one that's not the federal program, that's for the state program. If you got that application in and you ended up qualifying for PUA, that would have been considered timely. So the feds are saying that they will honor that indefinitely. So as long as you're in adjudication, as long as you're in an appeals process, and sometimes your employer might appeal and then drag on the process even longer. But until it's resolved, then the money is still available to pay you. I wanted to point out a new feature of the hearing process, which is interesting and sort of an improvement. This is an email that has been going to claimants saying to inform them that their hearing date has been scheduled. This is sometimes a big blank area for a lot of claimants because they put in an appeal and then maybe months go by before they actually get a date. So now they at least have a notice. This is the first time I've seen this. But it is an improvement, because what we told people before was that you needed to keep calling the Office of Administrative Hearings, and it appears that that will not be as necessary. That people should be getting this, at least if they're on the electronic, if they're on e-services, and can receive notices by email. And just in terms of another technology issue, I had a chance to check out ESD's virtual assistant, and I don't know how many people have looked into this. It's on the website under e-services, and just to see what kinds of issues might come up, I put in some sample questions to see how much of an assistant the virtual assistant really is. So first, what documents do I need to establish my identity? Virtual assistant was not too bad on this. They said, here's the phone number you call, here's the person who will verify your identity, and then you can email them a photo of an ID and so on. This is the facial recognition process under ID.me. So this they point out, the telephone number is for identity verification only, that these agents cannot help with claims. So this is fairly helpful. When you ask them, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit small, but when you ask them what can we do about overpayment? I've got an overpayment, how do I handle it? This is where the system breaks down a little bit, because as soon as you say, I don't have the money to pay an overpayment, the system will say, you can pay your overpayment by this process. And I tried wording it a different way and I got the same answer. So this is a point where the virtual assistant has limited intelligence. Sorry. And the third example was, what do claimants do when they don't have a smartphone to take a selfie for ID.me, because it is required for many claimants. Virtual assistant said, we just couldn't understand you. So this is another example of some of the shortcomings of virtual assistant. However, we have to give some credit to the attempt to bring other additional resources to claimants, because there is such a big information gap for people who are filing claims, and for people who are stuck in adjudication, and for people stuck in appeals. Finally, I wanted to mention the ID.me, a little bit more about the ID.me identity verification. There is quite a lot of controversy about this. This is well known. There's now 27 states that use ID.me, and this is a facial recognition service similar to what you might find at the airports if you are coming in through immigration customs. They would take a picture of your face, and it would electronically compare it to your passport. Unfortunately or not, this is becoming a very common way to establish identity. And of course, what is really driving this is the ongoing attention and concern about the level of fraud in terms of billions of dollars. Right now, the latest Department of Labor says $5 billion of potentially fraudulent unemployment payments were made last year. So that is what has accelerated this adoption of facial recognition And it's also accelerated, the whole pandemic has accelerated the use of biometrics. And also, in addition, the Department of Labor is providing funding, especially for agencies who want to install an ID.me system. But it's been pointed out that this is one really good way to look at this, is that it does work in the majority of cases, and say if it works in 95% of the cases. But one analyst, who's actually a professor of data policy, which is a new title I've not heard of before, compares this to a game of musical chairs. So if you have a room of 100 people, that means when the music stops, there's going to still be 5 people left without a seat. So what the aim should be, and computers are supposed to be comprehensive enough and intelligent enough to do this, is some kind of technology that works virtually 100% of the time, and can handle those 5 people who are still standing. The groups Fight for the Future and Electronic Frontier Foundation have both said that government agencies should not rely on a single system as the gatekeeper to access, especially to get people essentials that they need to survive. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention, that is New York's system for handling part-time work when its claimants are collecting unemployment. This is a very interesting program, and it shows how it's another example of how divergent systems are from state to state. In Washington, any money that you bring in, any earnings you bring in from part-time work or from self-employment, miscellaneous income, 75% of that amount is deducted from your weekly benefit. But in New York State, they have a different system. And in other states as well, they have what is called an earnings disregard. So if you look at the first, the state will look at the first 10 or few hours of work. That's considered 0 days worked, and there is no reduction in your weekly benefit rate if you're making less than 504 per week. So if you work 11 to 16 hours, there's a 75% reduction in your rate, in your weekly benefit, and that's considered 1 day worked. 17 to 21 hours, you lose half of your weekly benefit. But as you can see, that is a lot less money being shaved off of the weekly benefit than what we have in Washington State. And there is a lot of discussion. Is it possible that this actually is an incentive for people to find work even while they're unemployed? Right now in Washington, there isn't a whole lot of incentive, because the fraction of money that you actually get to keep, and people do need extra money on top of their unemployment benefits, but the fraction you get to keep is just a discouragingly low number. So there are systems out there that are much more lenient and give a lot more and cut a lot more slack for unemployment recipients. So those are some of the highlights of what's happening in unemployment this week.
Thank you, Ann. When you were talking about those answers to the questions not fitting, it shows the limitations of websites and information like that. And one thing that is pretty clear with any kind of legal issue, whether it be unemployment or anything else, that each case is very different. Questions are very different. So it's important for everyone not to rely on a blanket answer for any situation. Like and I had heard for years people tell me that people at the Employment Security Department told them that it was too late for them to file the appeal because it was past the deadline. Well, it may be true that particular appeal was late, but a judge in an unemployment hearing would consider a good reason for being late and possibly hear the case. So I know staff at Employment Security are not supposed to be advisors to people calling, but that's just an example of how a little bit of information can be somewhat true, but maybe not apply to a particular case. And Ann's point about the overpay, person saying they can't pay back. Well, of course, they're going to say you can make a monthly payment, but what we're talking about is there's under the rules for many overpayments, not all, but for many overpayments, A waiver should be considered if the overpayment is not your fault and it's a hardship to repay. And that's a very long analysis that really should not be answered with a one-line question. So that's why it's important for people to get individual advice and not rely on this. Often I will get a message asking for a question, maybe by email, and I will want to meet with the person to talk about more specific facts, or even by email ask them more questions, really to find out more what's going on. And when I get no response, I really don't feel comfortable giving advice, because it's like if somebody asked, if I get fired from my job for being late, can I get unemployment, or will I get unemployment? Well, the answer is maybe, because it's going to depend on why you were late, how often you were late, what kind of job it was. A lot of factors might go into it, where one case may go one way or the other, but it's never sort of a always yes, always no situation. So it's important there. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I have a couple questions that sound familiar, I think, from past weeks, because the questions keep coming. A question from a person who said they won their hearing like let's see, 2 months ago for a number of weeks of benefits, and haven't been able to contact ESD or find out what's going on. I have 2 suggestions here. This is a very common situation. One is to check in your e-services portal all notices and letters. Go back there, it's manage your claim, go to all notices and letters and look and be very careful, because it's possible, in some cases we've seen this, where there's another letter out there that denied you benefits for another reason, perhaps, or even we've seen some terrible results where a person is found to be able and available for work in their hearing about their job separation, and yet for some reason didn't get or did not appeal a separate determination saying that they were not able and available for work. Now, common sense would say they should just fix that, but under the system as is now, a person would have to request an appeal for that other determination, even though it's already been decided. And that should be pointed out at their hearing, of course. But so there are a lot of problems like that potential. I recently spoke to a man who won his hearing, had overpayments still, and it turns out that his overpayments, that he had gotten his more recent benefits, but that it was still showing overpayment because of an overpayment he had more than 5 years ago. Things like that may answer things. Now, if you can't figure out what's going on from that, of course, call your state senator, your state representatives. The Washington State Legislature website is www.leg.wa.gov. I can't guarantee results, but many people have told me or told us that contacting your state senator and state representatives by phone and email. I would contact all 3, because you don't know which office might be more active or more responsive. That this has helped get information to find out what's going on, or even having some claims resolved. And anything to add on that?
Just that it's been pretty common syndrome that the IT system cannot handle so many questions that a human could basically take one look at the screen and say, I see what's going on with your overpayment, for example. So luckily, the department is still engaged in adding a significant number of staff. And under the new rules that are set by SB 5193, that's improving claims processing. They will have to put out periodic periodic statistics on the lag time for getting these claims handled, as well as the phone access, which is the big obstacle for most people, because as John says, if you can get through on the phone, it's very likely, people do report that they can be very helpful, and that is the answer to their question. And you're not going to get an answer from a machine that is just spitting out notices mindlessly. Some of them duplicate, some of them are contradictory. So we would really, the human element needs to be increased, and we're hoping that that is going to be happening a little bit more in coming months.
All right. Let's see, we have a question here. This person was alerted to an ESD security breach and took precautions by joining I guess a credit monitoring or a protection system. And the person has now heard from an insurance company that there has been a breach. And the question is, must I sign up again for credit monitoring? I hate to say this is kind of outside of our area of expertise and knowledge. I would advise you to maybe to contact the local bar association if you're in King County Bar Association, or any local bar association, to get advice from an attorney or a legal clinic because of to see what advice that they might give in a situation like this. And unfortunately, I don't have any specific information or knowledge on that. Okay, let's go to next question. So this is a question we get a lot. This person requested a hearing a while ago, cannot get through to ESD on the phone to find out if they received it. I would suggest calling the Office of Administrative Hearings. I'm going to put the number in the chat. Okay. The Office of Administrative Hearings is 800-366-0955. There have been we've gotten a lot of calls on this, a lot of problems. There's a delay in the sending over files or information to the hearing office for scheduling. And then when it's sent over, there's a delay in the scheduling. They're behind many thousands of hearings, even though they've hired more staff and no judges. So if you call the hearing office and they will ask you for your docket number. Of course, you don't have a docket number at this time, but they will ask you your name. You can say and spell your name. They will ask for identifying information and ask if it's ready for scheduling. Some people say, well, we have the appeal. It'll be set in a certain number of months or a certain time. They might give you a general idea. If they don't have it by now, and it's been a couple months, I would again maybe contact your representative to try to get through the ESD, or file another appeal, but refer back. If you're filing a second appeal, you can file it a number of ways: fax, by mail, on e-services. Refer back to the prior filing because the appeal is probably would be late at this time, since there's a 30-day deadline. It's the kind of thing that you may do another hearing request, but refer back to them just so that they know that your appeal was originally filed on time. And have you had any updates from the hearing office on where they're at in terms of how many hearings they're behind right now?
No, I just the sense that they are feeling very bombarded and overloaded and overwhelmed. That's been kind of the situation for several weeks. They did go to the legislature last year and request funding because they were looking at a backlog of 70,000 hearings. So even though they've added a lot of judges, it's probably not enough. But I do know they're trying, and they continue to hire and continue to look for ways to speed things up.
Okay. And then another question here, is there any chance of getting the pandemic unemployment renewed Anne might have some information on that. Is there any bills in Congress or any action announced or possible action on this?
So there was some momentum a couple weeks ago because Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez was going to introduce a bill and it was drafted, but I don't believe it was ever introduced. There's been a loss of momentum because the Biden administration has made it clear they're not going to support it. So it's not a priority, and their hands are full right now with the budget reconciliation. So I don't think that's going to happen. They seem to be on a course where they think the economy is recovering and people are going back to work and there's less need. Of course, we know that that's not always true.
Okay. All right, that will wrap it up for the questions. There was a comment put in the chat regarding contacting state representatives. So that could be noted. We won't be back next week. We will not have a weekly webinar next week, but we'll come back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a good afternoon.